Hey, good morning. Let's talk about the Montgomery, Alabama waterway melee, where Uncle Charles, aka Uncle Reggie, was popping folk over the head with chairs. And Aquaman, aka Michael B. Phelps, played by Scuba Gooding Jr., was over there body slamming racists and everything. You seen it? Now, these brown bombers kicked so much butt that August 5th will forever be known as Cinco de Negro. And though we all enjoyed seeing racists get a much-deserved butt whipping, that butt whipping was a fear held among whites in the 17 and 1800s, so much so that they created the Second Amendment to protect them from an insurrection. You see, enslaved black people outnumbered free white people in the South, so much so that white people were always afraid that these enslaved black people would rise up against them and fight for their freedom. How dare they do such a thing? And one of their biggest fears was that the federal government wouldn't be there to protect them in case of a slave revolt. So they had organized militias to protect them just in case. You see, according to Dr. Carol Anderson, it was James Madison who crafted the language of the Second Amendment because of concerns brought by Patrick Henry and George Mason. Which is why James Madison put the words "a well-regulated militia" into the Second Amendment. That language gave assurances to Patrick and George that the militias would not be controlled by federal governments, but they would be controlled by the states and at the beck and call of the states to be able to put down slave uprisings. She goes on to say that in 1739, the Stono Rebellion happened, where enslaved black men fought back against the racist white men who enslaved them. They then killed these white people as they fought to get to Florida, where people were free. Well, when white people found out, they immediately grabbed their guns and went to war, as they were part of a militia whose job was to prevent black people from fighting for their freedoms. So on May 10th, 1740, just 1 year after the Stono Rebellion, the South Carolina Assembly enacted the Negro Act of 1740, also known as the Bill for Better Ordering and Governing of Negroes and Other Slaves in this province. This new law prohibited black people from growing their own food, from learning to read, moving freely, assembling in groups, and earning money. It also authorized white enslavers to whip and kill enslaved Africans for being rebellious. And in 1750, Georgia became a slave state. And shortly after Nat Turner's revolt, on January 17, 1834, the state of Alabama passed a law saying that if you are a black person, you cannot be free within the state of Alabama. Whether you're enslaved or free, if you're in the state, you are a slave. And if you were a free black person found in the state of Alabama, you got 30 days to leave. And if you don't leave by the 30th day, you get 39 lashes. After America's War of Independence, you saw incredible restrictions being put in place, limiting black people's access to guns. And restrictions got worse after each uprising. But it was the Haitian Revolution that put the fear of God into the hearts of white men. You had folk like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and James Madison losing their minds about what other enslaved black people would do if they found out other black people successfully revolted against their enslavers. The fear of freed black people sent shockwaves throughout the United States. By 1825, Florida had a law that gave white people the authority to enter into all Negro houses and lawfully seize and take away all such arms, weapons, and ammunition. In the 1850s at Scott v. Sanford, Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger Taney argued that black people couldn't be citizens under the Constitution because it would give to people of the Negro race the same rights as white people. We would have to treat them as citizens of this country, and we just can't do that. So we see that after the Stono Rebellion in 1739, states began passing laws that increase the amount of guns that white people can have while restricting the amount of guns and rights that black people can have. In short, the Second Amendment, gun rights, and gun laws exist because of white people's fears of a melee like that at the Alabama waterway.